Welcome to the Resilient Recruiter podcast. This is your host, Mark Whitby. My special guest today is Doug Johnson. Doug is the president of Valor Partners, an executive search firm he founded in 2002. Doug specializes in recruiting leaders in sales, marketing, and strategy within enterprise software. He's particularly focused on working with and placing female leaders in tech. Over the last 20 years, Doug has placed 600 high performers with companies such as SAP, Microsoft, Salesforce.com, Honeywell, GE, and numerous startups. Prior to founding Valor Partners, Doug spent 6 years at MRI, where he was a 5-time top 10 account executive of the year and 2-time national account executive of the year. He's a single dad with 2 kids and 2 dogs and a competitive tennis player. I've known Doug for, I think, about 4 or 5 years now. Doug, welcome and thanks for being here.
Glad to be here, Mark.
We've never actually met in person, but I think you have been to Scotland before, correct?
Yeah. I took my kids about 6 or 7 years ago.
All right, awesome. What brought you here? What were you doing over here?
After I got divorced, one of the things that I decided was I was going to try to make my kids' lives as sort of fun and enjoyable. Not to forget about the divorce, just to say, this is something that I'd like you to experience. And one of those things that was always big on the list was getting them out to see different parts of the world, meeting different parts of different cultures, different people, just seeing how different people lived and how different countries operated. And so the UK and Scotland, we have some friends over there as well. So it was always a good excuse to go visit friends and see different parts of Europe as well.
All right, cool. I love that. Doug, we're in a really strange market, which we're going to definitely talk about. We can't kind of ignore the elephant in the room. But before we get to that, let's go back in time. Can you talk me through your early career in recruiting, like how you got into recruiting and your early successes with MRI?
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's one of my favorite stories. So the way I got into recruiting was actually quite accidental. I had been living in Minneapolis. My wife had received an internship to a college in North Carolina. So we moved to North Carolina. The company that I had been working for in Minneapolis said, just stay with us, work remote, which was great. So I was able to work from the kitchen table, and it was an easy transition. And about 3 months into being in Charlotte, I got a call from the new boss who said, hey, tell me about your accounts and tell me about you. And we went through all of the accounts and everything. And at the end of sort of this download of all this information, the guy says, oh, thanks for all that information. By the way, you're fired. So he tapped me for all my account information, and then he let me go. And I was in shock. I said, why'd you do that? What's the problem? He said, I just don't want anybody remote. So, I get it. That's life. But here I was in this city I'd never been, had been working at my kitchen table for 3 months, had no job. And so my first reaction was, I better call some search firms to see if they've got any jobs for me. And I ended up calling a couple, and one of them said, yeah, come on in. We'd love to meet you. And at the end of the interview with this husband and wife team in this small office in the town next door, I said, so what do you think? And they said, yeah, we got a job for you. And I said, great. What is it? And they said, you see that desk right over there? Show up there and sit down at that desk tomorrow, and that'll be your job. And so I did. And I was effectively this woman's project coordinator. And Mark, I got to tell you, I hated it. I absolutely hated it. I didn't like working for this woman. She was demanding and she yelled at me, and it was hard. And so what I decided was that every day I was going to quit. So for the first 3 months, every day I went in, I told myself, this is it. This is my last day, so I'm going to make it my best day. And I would go in, and I would have a great day. And because that was it, I was done. And then I'd wake up the next morning, I didn't have anything else to do. So I would begrudgingly grit my teeth and go back in. And at the end of about 3 months, I sort of took inventory and stock of what I had done, and I discovered I was really quite good at it. And my boss was pleased, and so I sort of put my nose to the grindstone then and actually started to work at it. And 3 months later, I switched over to full-blown account executive, and sort of the rest is history at that point. So, that was, I guess I switched over to owning my own clients and effectively building my own desk in 1997.
That's the exact same year that I started.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, Doug, it's funny. You're the first person I've spoken to who has told me that when they started in recruiting, they wanted to quit. And I'm so glad you said that, because I felt the exact same way when I started. I was sitting there going, what have I gotten into here? Because it was like, okay, Mark, here's a desk, here's a phone, get on with it. And I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I was just supposed to make calls all day until I found some job orders. And
let's also remember that way back when you and I got started, the internet wasn't necessarily a thing. Yeah. Cell phones were not a thing.
Nope.
LinkedIn was a glimmer in someone's eye. I mean, that wasn't even an idea. So when I started, I would have to go home at night and I would have to do all my research where I had an internet connection, because this woman didn't have an internet connection at her office. I mean, it was just a phone. And I said, well, where am I supposed to get these numbers? And if I wasn't doing my own research at night, she had this big, thick book called Corp Tech.
Oh, yeah.
And there were about 3 volumes of it to find companies. So I'd have to look through and find these phone numbers and then call. And, it wasn't like I could flip through LinkedIn and find the next sales guy, the sales guy in Chicago or the marketing guy in Detroit. I couldn't do that. So you had to get really, really good at asking for referrals and networking and getting information from the people so you could maximize these phone calls. And, to all those recruiters that are just getting started or have been doing this for the last 5 years, you guys got it easy. You guys have it so easy. And it's a double-edged sword because it is so easy. They don't really, in my opinion, they don't really understand how to go about the business of getting referrals. They don't really work to improve those skills, or even in some cases learn those skills. And so they're content to go through LinkedIn and do all of their own research and really dig in to, finding names. And the reality is that if they were really good at getting referrals, they could shortcut the entire search process by simply asking for who's the best person here and who's the best person there. And the search would be done in a fraction of the time, which is, sort of one of the keys to, I think, what makes me good at what I do. Is not that I'm some super genius, just that I'm really good at asking questions and getting referrals.
Can we double click on that for a second, Doug? Like, could you elaborate on how you would set up the conversation in order to, put yourself in a position that the candidate or client is happy to give you those referrals? Like, what's the technique?
Mark, you're going to make me give away all my secrets. Okay, so I can't believe that more people don't do this. So here's the secret. The secret is in the introduction. Most recruiters, the vast majority of recruiters, will come into a call and effectively do the throw up or show up and throw up. Hey, candidate, I got a great job. Let me tell you about it. It's with a great company, working for a great boss, a great product, blah, 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 blah. And, that's noise. Everybody does it. It's ineffective. It doesn't work. And I've never done that. My big belief is that, and it's especially true in this particular market where there is so much noise, where these people get hammered by LinkedIn messages and email messages and, to a lesser degree, voicemail, which is somewhat to our advantage being old school. But they get overwhelmed with this stuff. And rather than just constantly pitch jobs, the ability to connect with people is really the critical element. And I don't mind, telling all of your viewers / listeners that that's the key, because you can either do it or you can't. So I'll give all of the techniques, and then they can do their best to implement them in their practices. So the key is to make it about the person that you're talking to. I mean, that is truly the key. To answer your question more specifically, when I make the introduction, you've got to bear in mind that the people that you're talking to from a candidate standpoint don't really know, or they don't know at all, what it is that you know. They don't know what you're working on. They don't know who your client is. They don't know how many clients you have. They don't know any of that stuff. And that's critical to remember in your introduction. So when I call somebody, I'll simply say, hey, Mark, my name is Doug. I'm an executive recruiter with Valor Partners. I'm working on several things in your area. Your name was given to me confidentially, and I'm interested to learn a little bit more about you. Are you open to having a conversation? That's it. I mean, there may be a little bit of slight variation there. But the subtle things that happened in that introduction that I will point out is that when I introduced myself, that's fine. But I mentioned that I'm working on several things in their area. I'm careful to never define their area. I want them to make any assumption that they want. They can assume it's geographic. They can assume it's industry. They can assume it's function. I don't care. I mean, make any assumption that you want. But I'm working on several things in their area. I always will come in and tell them that it was a confidential referral. Some people will not talk to me because I say that, and that's fine. I'm willing to lose candidates at that point if they don't like that confidential piece. And what I will tell them is, look, I've been doing this for a long time, and you don't have to have been doing this a long time, by the way. But I want them to understand that what they share with me stays with me, and that the relationship that we're going to build is going to be based on trust. And if they ask me to reveal a confidential source, and I do, the only thing that they're really hearing is you can't trust me, and I'm not gonna have the relationship based on that. So I will tell people that, and I'll say, now, do you want to talk to me or not? And some people still say no, and that's fine. That is fine. So that subtle piece of I'm working on several things in your area at the end of the conversation is when that becomes important, because I come back to them. I mean, let's use this as an example. And again, giving away the secrets here. Oftentimes I'm asked to work on searches where geography is less important. Let's say, I've got a search right now, for example, where location is the East Coast. Could be anywhere on the East Coast because the company is headquartered in the UK. They just want the same business day time zone. So anywhere on the East Coast is fine. So if I recruit somebody in Boston, because I've not said, hey, I need somebody on the East Coast, I have left open that they're going to make the assumption that it's Boston. So I can go any location south of Boston. I could say, let's say, for example, they're not my candidate for any number of different reasons. I don't have to say, hey, you're not my guy. I could say, hey, I like your background. I've got this exact same search in New York. Who's the best person you know? I've got this exact same search in DC. Who's the best person you know? Atlanta. Who's the best person you know? And I'm asking them for candidates for the exact same search. They don't know that. So how you get referrals oftentimes is based on how you set up your introduction. And I'm not being deceptive, and I'm not lying. I'm not doing any of that stuff. I'm just allowing the person I'm talking to make an assumption based on me not giving a bunch of specific detail.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Interesting. There was a lot there that resonated for me. And what I like about your introduction, Doug, is that you make it really easy for them to say, sure, I'd be open to a conversation. Whereas when someone comes along and pitches a specific opportunity, then number one, you're shooting in the dark because you have no idea what that person's interests are, what their ambitions are, what kinds of things are going to get their attention. So you're really doing yourself a disservice there. And number two, you're asking them, are you interested in this specific job? Which is a much taller, and it's a bigger ask than just saying, hey, are you open to having a conversation about, a number of opportunities? And that just feels like a much more natural way to get into a conversation.
Yeah, it is. And the other thing is that for all of you smart recruiters out there, if you're going to grow a business, the best way to do that is to be working with companies that are directly competitive or working in adjacent spaces, working on jobs that multiple clients will hire the same profile for. So in the perfect world, when I walk in and say, hey, I'm working on several things in your area, that's not a joke. That's not a lie. That's true. And all of these companies have subtle differences or big important differences. Some are big, some are small, some are, startups, some aren't, some are private, some are public. And I don't know what's going to resonate with that individual. So to your point, that's critically important. The other thing that allows, or the reason that I take that approach is that if I come in and I pitch a job, hey, Mark, I've got this job with this company. What you're listening for is stuff to say no to. I mean, people are naturally resistant to change. So they're not listening for things that where they'll say, oh yeah, that sounds lovely. What they're listening for is, how do I get out of this conversation? What is this clown going to say that will allow me to use that as the excuse? That's just what people will do that naturally. But if I come in pitching a single job, I don't get any chance to build a relationship with this person. I don't get a chance to know this person. I don't get a chance to ask this person for referrals later, because if I pitch the job and they say no, guess what? Call's over. I don't know anything about them. I don't know when to pick up the phone next. So it becomes a game of, it becomes a guessing game for the entirety of how long I might know this person. And the difference between, how I might do that or how you might do that, or, how somebody else might do that, is all in your ability to connect. And that's something, I can put words in people's mouths and I can tell them how to do it, but that, you can either do it or you can't do it. And, that's the ultimate difference maker is really taking the time to think about what resonates with people. And oftentimes, I will just sit down and run these conversations through my head, or, do the old fashioned talk into a mirror. Even with 20 years of experience, I'll still do this to play out if somebody was having the same conversation with me, how would I respond? What would make sense to me? Where would I be thinking this is, they're blowing smoke up my skirt? And get rid of the stuff that doesn't feel good and stick with the stuff that does feel good.
It's so important and overlooked to be able to really see things from another person's point of view. It's hard to do that, but if you can evaluate what you're saying and the questions you're asking from another person's point of view and think about how they might interpret or respond to that, I think that's really powerful, Doug. Tell me, so you billed $1 million a year for 2 years in a row with MRI. Yep. How did you go from the rookie, no experience, hated the job, to being able to pull that off?
One, I was and am pretty competitive. So that was sort of the driver. When I made that move from being somebody else's project coordinator to being an account executive, it was really based on money. And I don't mean that from the standpoint of, oh yeah, I got to make more. It was from the standpoint of, I had generated over $250,000 worth of cash in a relatively short period of time. And my take of that was about $10,000. And that math made no sense to me. So, it was at that point that I went to my boss and I said, this math is unworkable. And if this is the way it's going to be, I'm leaving. And what are our choices? And she offered to cut my salary in half. And at that point, my salary was only $1,100. So who cares? And she said, I'll cut your salary in half and I'll double your commission. My commission was 5%. So she was going to give me $500 and 10% of my deals. She said, or you can go straight commission for 35%. So I slept on it and quickly came in with the decision that straight commission was best. So I swallowed hard and went without any pay for several months. But my first commission check was $8,000.
Nice.
That was a lot of money. That was the most money that I'd ever seen in one check. And I was highly motivated because what I had done to earn that check to me didn't feel like work. I mean, I was just talking to people and I was having fun. I was learning every day. And I loved doing research on these companies. So, every night I'd go home and I'd do research, and every day I'd come in and I'd make those calls, and I was just hustling around, but it wasn't hustling for the money. It was hustling for the fun. It was hustling for the relationships and getting to know these people and talking to these people and sort of challenging myself. If I call this CEO, will the CEO talk to me? And sometimes they would, and sometimes they wouldn't. And I didn't care because there was always more people to call. And so that was the driver. And I sort of taught myself what I had said earlier, that if you're working in similar industries with similar companies or adjacent companies or the partners of your clients, they're looking for the same people. So work on the same general kinds of jobs, and really promoted within my own practice this idea of candidate recyclability, where I could learn from all my candidates. I never looked at the process as this thing happens in a vacuum. If I'm recruiting this particular candidate, it's not for this particular job over here. It wasn't this one call for this one thing. It was this one call for this client, this client, this client, this client. And oh, by the way, candidate, I'm also working on these related roles. Who's the best person you've worked with in this area, in that area, in that area? And tell me about who the competitors are that you lose to, and tell me why you lose, and tell me, when you win, why do you win? And so I was just gathering all of this information that was all related. It was all related. And so I was able to sort of quickly move through identifying who are the best people, who are the best companies, who are the companies you want to avoid, what's happening, news, trends, all of these different things in single phone calls. I was able to gather all of this information. So I didn't have to go and, read through journals and trade publications and, check the news and do all this stuff at night. I mean, I was absorbing so much information over the course of the day. And what happened as the natural consequence was I was making deal after deal after deal because I was aware of all of these things that were happening in the industry. I mean, hell, Mark, I would recruit somebody out of company A to one of my clients, and I would call the CEO at company A to say, hey, I've got a great candidate in Chicago. And the guy's like, no, we got somebody in Chicago. I'll be like, oh, well, take my number. If something happens, let me know. The guy was going to quit in 2 days. So I was smart about this stuff. And when you spin the wheels together in the right way to get multiple pieces of information, multiple pieces of data out of one call, that's how you're able to do this stuff. That's how you're able to build a business. If you're always off doing something because, oh, it's fun, or oh, it's different, or oh, my phone rang and I answered it, you'll make money and it'll be good, but you'll be learning a new business. You'll be learning a new industry. You'll be learning a new function all the time. And trust me when I tell you that while you're making money and it feels like you're growing a business, the reality is if that is your strategy, you're going to be 10 years into your business, 15 years into your business, and you're going to look around and say, what have I built? And the answer is going to be my bank account and not much else. And you're still going to be working your ass off because you've got to relearn stuff every time, or not even relearn it, just learn it for the first time. And honestly, that's a little bit of what I'm experiencing today, because part of my issue for as successful as I was a bit of a generalist. I wasn't a bit of a generalist. I was a really, really good generalist. And the generalist is dying. And I'm learning that the hard way, and it's painful because I've got a lot of relationships with a lot of super cool, successful people scattered across the enterprise software space. But I've done it all. It's not like I have a Rolodex of just customer success people, or just a Rolodex of product marketing people, or whatever. I mean, I've got a Rolodex of damn near everybody in every function. And the reality is, the sad reality for me is that it's painful. It's painful.
What do you mean by that? What's painful?
It's sort of a double-edged sword of, I can do anything. I can recruit anybody. I know a bunch of people. So it's not a matter of being able to do things. It's a matter of your life being easier. And what I've found is that no matter how large my firm is, and I never aspired to grow a really large company. I mean, we got 4 people here today. We've been as large as, I think, 10 or 11. And those numbers cycle up and down. That's not the important piece for me. The important piece these days, having done this for as long as I have, is that sometimes I just want my life to be easier. Sometimes I just want to be able to be the guy that's known as, the best recruiter for this function or this industry. And, a lot of people will know me for that, but not everybody knows me for that. And so it's frustrating, because when I'm introducing myself to somebody new, oftentimes, and this is a relatively new trend that I've seen over the last probably 3 to 5 years, though I'm sure it's been happening for longer than that. You'll get these questions, when you identify an opportunity, when you're asked to do something, they'll say, well, for example, if I'm asked to do a VP of sales search, which I've done tons of VPs of sales searches, but it's not all that I do. And so you run into these people that will ask the question, because it seems like a legitimate question, how many VP of sales searches have you done the last year? And you say 2 or 3, and that's pretty good. And they say, oh, well, we really want somebody that's done 8 or 10 or 15. Like, well, that's not me. Could it be me? Sure, it could be, but it's not. And that's really the challenge, is, trying to figure out, what do I want to be? What do I want to be known as? And then you sort of roll around, is that really important? And some days it's more important than other days, but I can tell you that if you built a practice that was all focused on one particular function in one particular area, let's say that all you did was salespeople for financial services. It sucks to start from zero, or start from scratch, or start from a couple. But you've got to keep your eye on sort of what that end game is. Where am I going to be 6 months from now? Where am I going to be a year from now? If that's your message over and over and over again, you're only talking to VPs of sales because you only do financial services salespeople. That is it. You get to know all of those people. So, a year later, after you've done that, after you've been consistent, you've built a pretty big network of people. You know a lot of people. So when you get that search, it's not going to take you 100 phone calls. It's going to take you 10. Because again, you're working within this sphere of connections where everybody knows everybody. So even if you don't know the candidate for that particular search, chances are probably pretty good you know the candidate that knows the candidate. So, I mean, recruiting is one of those things where it's a lot of work, it's a heavy lift, but focus and sort of keeping your eye on where this thing could go if you do it right is key. And then you just have to be careful to make sure that you're not specializing in something like airline pilots when a pandemic hits.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Doug, I agree 100%. I'm a huge believer in being a specialist and having a niche that you are focused on. In fact, my Billings Accelerator program, the second module is about how to identify or like define or redefine your market niche so that you're, going to be able to accomplish exactly what you just described. Can I just go back a minute? Like the timeline from you to when you became an account executive to when you started really getting traction and getting all these deal after deal after deal, how long did that take?
6 months.
Okay, wow. So, and then from there, you had a great run with MRI. What made you decide that you wanted to go out on your own and do your own thing?
So I love this story because it's one of those things where it makes people's jaws drop. So that story goes like this. I was the 2 years that I was the National Account Executive of the Year, not surprisingly, were my best W-2 years. And it was over, I made over $650,000 in both of those years. But I had this sort of nagging desire to help people learn the business in the same way that the woman that I had been working for had helped me to learn my business. Now, she was tough. I always referred to her. I don't even know if she's still alive anymore. Because she was about 75 then, so probably not. But it wouldn't surprise me if she was. But she was tough. She was a battle axe, and she yelled a lot, and wouldn't allow me to get away with anything. But she also taught me how to do this business successfully, and how to deal with clients, and how to deal with just about any situation that had come up. And I will be forever grateful. I didn't appreciate it probably as much as I should have in those moments, but I appreciate it a lot now. And I'm, like I said, I'm grateful for what she taught me. She gave me a great foundation. But I got to that point where I wanted to do for someone else what she had done for me. And here I was successful. I was busy. I was super busy because you can't bill over $1 million as a solo without, getting to the point where you're running on fumes pretty fast. And I could have really used some help. So it was sort of a win-win. I'd bring somebody in, train them in the same way that she trained me, fundamentally change their life for the better, like she changed mine. And, we could do even more. And it was going to be great. And so I approached her with this idea of, hey, let me bring in a project coordinator to work with me that I can teach in the same way that you taught me. And she said, no. She said, I want you to sit at that desk and keep doing what you're doing, make a lot of money. It'll be great. And of course, where I might have made, 600,000, she was making 700,000. So it was a hell of a deal for her. Literally she had to do nothing at that point. Nothing. Wake up, breathe air, have some food, go to bed, make 700 grand. And I couldn't believe that she wouldn't let me bring somebody on. And so I quit. So my wife looked at me and she's like, wait a second, you want to quit? And I said, yeah. She's like, but you're making so much money. And I said, don't care. This is more important to me. I want to have a greater impact than just padding a bank account. And so I quit. And my boss couldn't believe it. And she said, you think it's going to be easy. You think you're going to make so much more money. And I didn't really think that, but.
It's very short-sighted. She killed the goose that lays the golden eggs. And instead of thinking bigger, that, if this guy wants to progress and develop, and he's got that ambition, that's absolutely the person I want on my team. He's going to grow my business for me.
Yeah, not on her team. Crazy. No, she didn't want that. So yeah, it was a little short-sighted, and I have been able to do what I set out to do, not as many times as I would prefer, but I've got, several examples of having sort of fundamentally changed people's lives for the better by teaching them the same way that she taught me.
So paint a picture then. So you left the desk that was really cranking. I mean, you were doing phenomenally well, and then you're starting not from scratch because you have all the knowledge and all the contacts, but you're sort of pressing reset and going again under your own banner. What were the challenges involved in making that work?
Yeah, well, so it got ugly. So that's where your challenges really start. So initially she was like, "Oh yeah, I understand. That's fine." Then she sued me. Then she enforced a non-compete radius of 50 miles and said, if you want to be a recruiter, you can either move or sit on the bench for a year. So I moved. So, my challenges got fairly monumental immediately. We figured out a workaround on the suing me part. And we settled for me paying her a whole lot of money in year one for a copy of my data. So, the good news was I would be able to keep my clients. I wouldn't have to start from scratch, but it would hurt me financially in year one, and it did. But then I had to move, and then I had 2 young kids, and then I had to find space and buy computers and phones and all the stuff that goes into sort of just the overall setup of getting in place. So those were sort of the big fundamental challenges. But once I got that stuff done, then I just had to learn how to operate on my own, truly on my own, not having somebody I could ask questions to, not having somebody that would send out an invoice for me like, the front office person there, the receptionist would from time to time. So I had to do all that stuff on my own. So it was a heavy lift.
Yeah, no, totally. So fast forward, that was 2002. You set up Valor Partners, right? So
2003. I left my old place 2002.
Okay, so 17 years that you've been doing this now. Wow. In the 20 minutes we have left, we're not going to be able to do that justice. But
right.
So look, let's fast forward to today, Doug, and with everything you know and all the experience and the success you've had, what's your take on the current market and how people can best kind of get through this, this terrible market that we're in?
What are you talking about?
What crisis?
Yeah. So, let's not pretend that everything is great. It's not. This is really hard. This is how I describe this to people. I lived through the tech bubble bursting in 2000, 2001. Those were my best years. They were my best years. And all I was doing was tech. So I know that stuff happens, that can be really positive in what seems like the gloomiest of conditions. And I lived through the financial downturn, didn't even feel it. But this is different because this impacts everybody. It impacts every industry. It impacts every level of position, every size company, everything, because you get to see the interconnectedness of how, for example, the companies that I serve, these software companies, the companies that they serve are impacted. They don't have as much money to spend on software, which means the software companies aren't going to grow as fast, which means they don't need my help as much. It's not a shock. That said, there's still a lot of stuff out there in my industry and in lots of other industries. So the realities are that, you need to work harder. There's no getting around it. And you need to utilize the resources that are available to you. And it's going to take longer to get to those goals. There's just no getting around it. To anybody, I would say accept it. Make peace with the way this is. There ain't no magic bullet that's going to make it easier for you to get clients. Now, there are some things that will make it easier for you to get clients, and it's the stuff that has always worked. Well, if you know this stuff. So, the things that I would suggest are, you better be a human being. Start there. Be empathetic. Understand that, you've got to be somewhat relatable, if not completely relatable, to get people to engage. Because if to go back to what I was talking about earlier and what you were quick to agree with is, think about these people that are, doing the job that you're trying to recruit and what their life is like. They're getting hammered by emails. Hammered. They're getting emails at their work email. They're getting LinkedIn messages like it's going out of style. They're getting phone calls all day long from recruiters or from salespeople or from whatever. I mean, that's over and above the people that are actually contacting them about their business, about their clients or their prospects or their partners. I mean, they're getting hammered by those people as well. So everybody is overwhelmed. So how do you separate yourself from the noise? That is really the key to growing your business in this market, is being able to separate yourself. That doesn't mean you're going to work less. You won't. But it will make you more, I think, trustworthy, worthwhile. You'll get more referrals. All of those things will make a difference. All of the things that are happening right now, that you're doing right now, will set you up for 6 months from now, or a year from now, or whenever this thing breaks. And that's where you have to really focus. So even on those days where I don't want to make a phone call, and believe me, there's a lot of them, where I'd rather just sit behind the keyboard and pound out emails. And that doesn't make for much of a relationship. So I'm picking up the phone, remembering that 6 months from now, this work that I'm doing right now today will pay a dividend. And that's, you got to have the blind faith that that's going to be the case. And I got, 20 plus years of blind faith that says that's the case. So that's what I'm continuing to do. I'm not doing anything that's all that different. I'm doing the stuff that works, and I'm really sensitive to making sure that I'm respectful of the people that I'm reaching out to. I will tell you, and all the people that are listening, that one of the things that I get the most probably positive comments about, and if somebody wants to go look at my LinkedIn page and read some of the recommendations, you'll see this stuff. Because when people say this to me, I tell them, I'm gonna send you something. I want you to write a recommendation about that, or write an endorsement about that. And it is being respectful of the fact that I don't know anything about these people when I reach out to them. Nothing. I don't know what they like, what they don't like. I don't know if they're happy or unhappy. I don't know any of that stuff. And I acknowledge that from the beginning. From the introduction, I am saying to people, I don't know anything about your circumstance. We've never talked before. I don't know you. Who am I to assume that I know what's best for you? I have no idea. And that acknowledgement is, the difference between who's good at recruiting and who's not good starts right there. Because that is a human connection that you're making, that acknowledgement that you don't know anything. That's really key. And especially in this market where there's so much noise and so much, distraction, fluff, smoke, the ability for you to connect at a human level with somebody is critically important.
Beautiful. Very well said.
Thanks.
Yeah. Hey, Doug, you and I were speaking a while back about the frustration of clients canceling orders and pulling the rug out from underneath you. and that you have a remedy for that. Would you mind saying a little bit about how you convince clients that, paying a deposit or an engagement fee makes sense from a, why they would want to do that?
Yeah. So it is my greatest frustration in this business right now. It happens all the time. We've been tracking our jobs for 5 years. Those searches that are incredibly well qualified with good companies that have a sense of urgency, all of the right characteristics of what should be a good search. 60% of them end with the search being canceled or filled through another source when there's no other candidates, so they say, when we start the search. And that's a lot of lost time and a lot of lost resources. And for my firm, that is somewhere between 40 and 60 searches a year. So the way that I've discovered that the best way to get deposits is really about the questions that you ask. And I think that there's two different levels of questions. There are those questions that are sort of the obvious teeing up the engagement fee questions. The how much money have you lost, and how much money do you think it's costing you to leave this position open? And gosh, that sure is a lot. I think that's garbage. I mean, those are good questions. Then they will work. But it is really the questions, again, that sort of relate to the human condition around what's happening. Things like to the boss that you're talking to, how does this position impact your life? What's happening with your life because of this? And if you can connect with people, again, you're going to get questions like, I have to work longer hours, to which I say, so what? Well, I don't get to see my kids as often. So what? I want to uncover, significant pain. And what I'm asking for a deposit is really not all that significant, but I'm also taking the time to explain. I learned this from one of my coaches, and it's highly effective. A guy named Mike Gianta. Is that when you're going into these conversations, a lot of it is about helping them to understand what you do. So Mike's really big on helping these companies to sort of understand, from the moment we hang up after we talk about this job to the moment I send you a candidate, do you have any idea what happens? And the answer is almost always no, because they don't care. They just want the candidates. But it's critically important that they understand all of the things that happen so they can see how you're spending money and time to help them solve their problem. And so when you get done with that, very simplistically, to simply say, and for that reason, this is how I engage. And then you can sort of line out the terms. And if they don't want to pay a deposit, then you get to make a decision about how you're going to sort of deal with that, or not deal with it. Sometimes sticking to your guns is best. And really being able to explain things like, well, if you're going to engage 3 contingent recruiters, do you really expect 300% better performance? Is that what you expect? And to some degree, your job is to make your clients sort of feel stupid. And I hate to say it like that because they're not stupid, but they just don't understand. And nobody's ever taken the time to explain it to them. So, when you take the time to explain it to them, the other thing is really important. And I suffer with this, believe me, even after 20 years, I don't give myself nearly enough credit sometimes for what I'm capable of doing to impact somebody's business. Just that confidence of being able to say, my deposit is $10,000. I deduct it from the final fee upon placement. As soon as I get your check, I'll start your search. To say that with conviction and mean it and, have it stick. Yeah, I mean, you've got to say that like you've said it 1,000 times. And you've got to say it in a way. I mean, think about what, some of these big retained firms. I mean, the expectation is if you're talking to Korn or Heidrick or any of that other firm, any of those other firms, when they say, the deposit's going to be $50,000 and then we'll invoice you the second, third. I mean, it's just sort of this is just how we do it. You know how we do it. Just send us the check. We'll get started. It is assumed. And I think for any size firm, my size firm, your size firm, whatever, that same general attitude, if you're going to charge a deposit, that's the way it's got to be. You have to just have that attitude that, of course, I'm going to charge you a deposit. I mean, what do you expect?
Doug, I often share with my clients your Mount Kilimanjaro story. In fact, it's in the first module of my program is about getting clear on your vision, what you were trying to achieve, why you want that. And I use the analogy of, you taking your kids up Mount Kilimanjaro. Could you tell that story in the time we have left?
Sure. Yeah. So what spawned that vision is I got divorced and I dated somebody and we talked about all of these life goals that we had. And the thing that this woman wanted to do is she wanted to climb Mount Kilimanjaro while there was still snow on the mountain. And I always thought to myself, that's kind of cool. And then years later, I got divorced again. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to do that. And so I started looking into it and did a bunch of research and told the kids after I made the decision, I said, next summer, we're going to Africa and we're going to go on safari and we're going to see lions and giraffes and elephants and it's going to be cool. And they were like, hooray. Because they weren't particularly old. I think they were, 13 and 15 or 12 and 14 or something like that. And then I sort of said, oh yeah, and we're going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. And that was sort of an enthusiasm killer for them. But we spent the next year training. We got elevation masks, which are effectively just masks that restrict your oxygen, so we could train, here pretty much at sea level for 12,000 feet, 15,000 feet, and it brought us together. It gave us something to do. I mean, there was always, we can't go do that because we got to train this morning. So we all got on a schedule, and then we got over there, and it was, Africa is a crazy place, and we had gotten with a guide who was great, and his team was great, and the people that help you up the mountain they're not, in the Himalayas they're Sherpas, and on Kilimanjaro they're porters. And we had a team of 12 porters for the three of us because you can't build fires on the mountain. So they've got to carry gas and they've got to, find water as you go up the mountain in all of these different places. And it was an incredible production and you expect, it's a beautiful mountain. No, Kilimanjaro is horrible. It is horrible. You spend the first day in the jungles and there's monkeys at your campsite and that you can't leave out anything shiny because they'll climb down and they'll take it and you'll never see it again. And it's awesome. And then the next day you're still climbing up and there's scrub brush and all this stuff. And the third day it's rock. It's like walking on the moon. And you spend 4 days walking for somewhere between 6 and 10 hours on the surface of the moon. There's nothing to see. And, summit day, you start at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. and you climb for 7 hours in the dark. That was the only day we had trouble. My son, we're probably an hour from the summit and we stopped to get a drink and it's freezing and he peels off his coat and he just starts walking away. I'm like, dude, where are you going? And the guides knew exactly what was going on, which was he was starting to suffer from elevation sickness.
Oh, gosh.
And the guide ran over, threw his coat on him, grabbed him and just started, rubbing his shoulders. And I don't know what he was saying to him. He was just sort of whispering in his ear, trying to get him to come back. He popped back a couple minutes later and just sort of overwhelmed and he's crying and just trying to sort of get his senses about him. And then he got his senses back and it was like everybody at that point just had massive determination to get to the top. And so an hour later, we were standing at the top of Kilimanjaro, all by ourselves. Everybody else had already summited that day. We were the last group to summit. And it was a big accomplishment. Of course, then we had to leave the summit. We left the summit at about 9 a.m. and we had to do most of the descent the same day. So we went 48 kilometers on the last day, up and most of the way down. We walked for 17 hours that day.
Oh my gosh. Amazing. Yeah. What an experience to share with your kids that, no matter what happens, you guys, that must be a memory forever. That's incredible.
Yeah, it is. It went on every college application, what they learned, determination, courage, all of those attributes they took away from that trip. So I'm glad we did that.
Amazing. Doug, I've really enjoyed this. Thank you very much. And I know you've got a call that you have to jump onto. So let's do it again. Thanks for sharing your insight and wisdom over 20 years experience.
Sure. I hope it was helpful.
It was.